I've been meaning to illustrate the story of creation just to give a visual as a kind of where we are so far in our Bible reading. Now, I'm going to be illustrating this based on the fact that I'm not part of this religion anymore, and I'm going to be illustrating this from the perspective of someone who's reading this as a mythological creation story, not as someone who is trying to make this seem possible. And so I just want to put that out there before we start. So looking back on what we've already read, we started with a watery chaos and the Spirit of God sort of hovering over it. Then God creates light and separates the light from the darkness and calls the light day and the darkness night. That's the first day. Then God creates an expanse to separate the waters, the sky, and we have this weird bubble thing. This is the entire universe so far. Creating the bubble takes a lot of effort for God, so that's the second day. And then God creates land and seas and vegetation, and that's day 3. And after that, God makes the sun, moon, and stars, which, by the way, are below the waters above since they're placed in the expanse of the sky. That's day 4. And then God creates living creatures, but just the ones in the sky and in the seas. That's day 5. And then God creates animals, and finally he creates man on day 6. This is undisputed. This is the order of creation as we were taught in Sunday school. But it's about to get a little bit wonky. Genesis 2. So the heavens and the earth and everything in them were completed. By the 7th day, God completed his work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work that he had done. God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, for on it he rested from his work of creation. Man and woman in the garden. These are the records of the heavens and the earth, concerning their creation at the time that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. No shrub of the field had yet grown on the land, and no plant of the field had yet sprouted, for the Lord God had not made it rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. So in order to keep illustrating, we're going to have to go back in time to day 3. Yes, I guess now we're in the middle of day 3, in between the creation of land and the creation of singing vegetables. But water would come out of the ground and water the entire surface of the land. Then the Lord God formed the man out of the dust from the ground and breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and the man became a living being. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he placed the man he had formed. The Lord God caused to grow out of the ground every tree pleasing in appearance and good for food, including the tree of life in the middle of the garden, as well as the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river went out from Eden to water the garden. From there it divided and became the source of 4 rivers. The name of the first is Pishon, which flows through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. Gold from that land is pure. Bdellium and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is Gihon, which flows through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris, which runs east of Assyria, and the 4th river is the Euphrates. The Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and watch over it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree of the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for on the day you eat from it you will certainly die." Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper as his complement." So the Lord God formed out of the ground every wild animal and every bird of the sky, and brought each to the man to see what he would call it. And whatever the man called a living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock, to the birds of the sky, and to every wild animal. But for the man no helper was found as his complement. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to come over the man, and he slept. God took one of his ribs and closed the flesh at that place. Then the Lord God made the rib he had taken from the man into a woman, and brought her to the man. And the man said, This one, at last, is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one will be called woman, for she was taken from man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and bonds with his wife, and they become one flesh. Both the man and his wife were naked, yet felt no shame. Okay, so we have our man, and then God creates a little garden for him in the east. There's the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then the river, which splits off into some of the major rivers of the ancient Middle East. God creates creatures for the man, but the man wants to go to Pound Town, and the creatures God brings him aren't really great for that. So God creates woman, and they're both naked. Great atmosphere. As you can see, we seem to have diverged from the original story. Now, scholars believe Genesis 2 was added on later, sometime after the Israelites began observing the Sabbath. I've heard a few arguments from apologists as to why these two stories don't actually diverge, namely that all of the other vegetation and creatures must have been created before man and livestock and woman. I'm willing to accept that just fine, although it still sits a little funny with me, since it seems pretty clear that God is creating the creatures after the man, specifically the birds, which we said were created on day 5 before. That one's a little hard to talk yourself out of. Believe me, I know. One thing I do want to draw attention to is verse 2, where it says that God rested. The footnote here gives another word for that. It says ceased. It could be read as God just ceased. It has a certain finality to it that I find very interesting. I also think it's interesting that this story gives an origin for the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It's important to note that the people of the ancient Middle East saw these rivers as a sort of life force. Most creation myths from those people groups mention those rivers, usually making them into deities. We're seeing something similar here, I think. What did you think of Genesis 2? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like or dislike the video and subscribe for more. At this rate, I'll finish reading in about, 80 years. See you in the funny papers.